We still there? Looks like, oh. Oh, there we go. Oh, switching. For some reason, I lost you when I switched browser. Okay, we're back. So there's Jed's tweet, in case you missed it. He basically says his sister's obsessed with knitting. She has a manual technique for keeping track of her patterns. Is there a good program for that, or should he make one? And that is a really good question, because I default to keeping track of my patterns by hand myself. And I'll show you on my iPad how I'm keeping track of this particular pattern. But there is software. There is software that you can get for keeping track of where you are in a knitting pattern. And as far as I know, best of breed for this is software here, which is called Knit Companion. If you look it up, knitcompanion.com. I've played around with it a little bit. It uses a PDF pattern, and if the pattern is formatted in the right way, you can have different counters and different charts where you keep track of which line you're on in the chart, all kinds of stuff like that. There are a couple caveats that I called out to Jed. And I don't want to crap on Knit Companion. It's great, and I think whoever's done it has done a good job of building the tool that they want to use, and other people find it really helpful. Wow, every time I switch, I'm getting a problem with the stream. It looks like. Is it back? Just trying to reconnect here. Okay, looks like it's back. Yeah, so you have to have a pattern that's formatted in the right way to use. And of course, most knitting patterns are not formatted in the right way. Either they're not a PDF. You do get a lot of PDFs these days. But to take full advantage of the program, you need to have a pattern that's formatted in the right way. And not a lot of them are. So you've got to do some work to get it set up. And also, and like I said, I'm not trying to just dismiss the hard work that's gone into this. The user interface is a bit dated. It looks like Windows software from back in the day, and that's fine. It gets the job done, but it's not the easiest to use or prettiest software in the world. And that is a problem that I see that's actually very common to textile-related software. There's a lot of software you can buy for knitting, patterns to design garments, software to keep track of where you are in a pattern, software to convert a photo into a knitting, a ferrule pattern or a cross-stitch pattern. All of the user interfaces suck. They're all badly usable. They're all badly designed. Not badly designed, look, the really good designers in the world are not working on the knitting and the sewing software, and that's a shame. So yes, Jed, if you want to design something better, I would love that. If any of you people watching who have technical skills want to design some really nice, usable textile software, that'd be amazing. I think that's part of the reason why Ravelry was such a success. Interestingly, they finally did their first redesign this year. Was it earlier this year? Yeah, they did a redesign of their look and feel after 10 years. And people freaked out. They hated change. So maybe there's something in the knitting community and the textile community where we don't mind stuff that looks a little bit older and dated. Personally, I prefer to use something that's a little bit more up to the moment in terms of design and usability. But my mom's a quilter. And I was talking to her earlier in the week because, there's these companies who make these big long arm quilting machines, these very highly sophisticated machines that cost tens of thousands of dollars that can quilt. Basically, it's a sewing machine with a really long arm that goes over an entire blanket and so has a quilting area bigger than my desk. And you can buy and download patterns for the pattern of quilting that it does. And this particular company had some software for you to organize, search, and tag your long arm quilting patterns. Okay? $150. $150 for software to allow you to tag and organize some electronic files. Like, don't most operating systems have that built in? Like, how can that be worth $150? And I guarantee you, even if you bought it, I've seen the interfaces on these machines. If you pay $30,000 for one of these things, the interface looks like industrial software from the 70s. Like, it's not easy to use. Your newest, printer or scanner has a much more advanced user interface than these things have. So please, industrial designers, usability designers, please go work on some textile software, because it's all ugly and I want to use something that's a little bit more pleasant to use. So that's my rant about the design, the usability of textile related software. And just to show you how, because I don't use one of these, I'll show you how I'm keeping track of my particular pattern. I will just open up my iPad here. So I use an app called Notability. And so here is the pattern for Lenatus. So there's the picture. That's the picture in the book by Susan Crawford. I think that actually is Susan Crawford. And so what I did in Notability, or you can use many other PDF programs, is because I'm knitting, I went through and I actually highlighted the size that I'm knitting with a little highlighter. And you'll see here, so every time there is a section that has, here's a section that has multiple numbers, I've highlighted the one that I will be doing. If there's a section that does not apply to my size, as you can see here, I'm doing the 6th size. So this section, 4th and 5th sizes only, I've crossed it out, because otherwise I will accidentally knit the wrong section. And so I actually spent 5 minutes before I started knitting and went through and did this throughout the pattern. So I've highlighted my size, I've crossed out bits that I don't need, and then as I'm knitting, I'm actually ticking off the sections as I go. So I'll be doing this on printed paper as well. You can easily do this on printed paper, but I'm doing it on the PDF. Here's a section where it actually splits for the plain body versus the all-over body. And again, I've crossed out the sections. The all-over Fair Isle body, I've crossed out the sections that I am not doing. And on the charts, so for example, there's different charts for the different sizes. I've, again, scribbled out the ones that I'm not using just so I know where I am. But yeah, that's how I do it. I tend to use paper, or now that I've got the iPad with pencil, I use that. Paper is not, paper has advantages in that you can jump back and forth, but you could spread out multiple bits. You can get, if you're using paper, one thing that's cool, and another, I keep giving people suggestions for Christmas presents. A nice Christmas present for a knitter is you can buy like a metal board, like a little easel with a magnetic strip on it that the person can put, so they can put their pattern on this little magnetic board and then move the magnet to keep track of where they are in the pattern. So that's a nice thing to get someone. If they're a knitter, you could get them a little magnetic pattern holder, metal pattern holder. Or if you want to splurge, get them an iPad with a pencil, and then they can use heaps of OneNote or Evernote, or I use Notability. Any of those you can use PDFs and mark them up, which is nice. Has anyone used any knitting software that they actually like? Anyone in the chat, please share if you have some that you like, because I'd love to check it out. But Knit Companion, I've been to the Knitters Guild camp in New South Wales, and I believe we actually had a session where Joyce, who's a lovely video knitting podcaster, she gave a session on how she uses Knit Companion, because it's not simple, it's complicated software. And if you've got a pattern with multiple charts going and you're going to have multiple counters going, I don't want you to think that this is easy software. And so seeing, a grandmother sit there and explain how she sets this stuff up was every tech person should have to sit through a conference talk like that, to be honest with you, to see how people are able to use really complicated software, often in spite of the user interface. So it's just, I think Knit Companion does a great job at doing what it does, and people love it. It just isn't the right for my workflow. And in general, I just find that I want more of the textile software to have a nicer user interface. Gumnut Baby says, used to have the magnet board for cross stitch. Yeah, it's great for cross stitch as well. And all of this applies just as equally pretty much to, I'm sure there's probably software for doing it with cross stitch as well, or you could just use Notability or a PDF markup as I've done. And of course, there's other software out there, specific, like there's a new one in Australia where you design the jumper in it and then it keeps track for you as you knit it. Stuff like that, you know, but I tend to prefer general purpose tools that I can use with any pattern as opposed to specific ones. Yeah, and Knit Companion can import any PDF, but you, like I said, if it's not already a PDF and if it's not sort of set up in a way that's easy for you to use in the Knit Companion way, it's a little tricky. And I think they have different levels of, you have to pay for Knit Companion. I mean, the basic version is free, but if you need to do some sort of more difficult pattern manipulation, I think you have to pay. So depends on whether you want to do that. If you knit really complicated lace shawls and stuff, you know, it might be worth it actually. It probably is. I just don't knit those things, so for me the utility isn't quite there. But if you have questions, thanks for prompting that little digression, Jed. So if you have any questions or knitting techniques you want to see, hit me up on Twitter or leave a comment. And I will be happy to talk about it. Incidentally, by the way, that was the first time I've swapped the blue wool on this garment. Like, I thought I was going to need heaps. I bought like 5 balls of the blue, and I'm only on the second one now. So assuming I use 2 for the body and maybe 1 each for the sleeve, I don't know. It's good. I think 5 is going to be plenty, but I'm just surprised that the yarn is going a lot further than I expected. And it's not the yarn recommended in the pattern. So we talked last week about, you know, having to adjust needle size for tension and things like that. But that's the other trick, is a pattern will tell you how many balls of wool you need, but that is for the specific wool that was listed in the pattern. And 50 grams of 8-ply wool can have very different lengths on the ball, depending on how it's spun, how it's put together, if it has any other fiber mixed in with it. You know, acrylic, a 50-gram ball of acrylic goes a long way versus a 50 because it's lighter. So if you're looking at the ratio of the length to the weight, you know, an acrylic is going to be a lot lighter, and you're going to get a lot more on the ball than you will with cotton. Cotton, a 50-gram ball of cotton is probably going to have the least because it's the heaviest. And so these are actually these are 50-gram balls, and you can see on the label it's got around 300 meters, it says. And so what I did is I looked at the wool in the pattern, and I looked up on Ravelry how many meters per ball that one has. And so let's say it had 350 meters on that one. And so I multiplied out how many balls the pattern said I had by how many meters. And I know that's roughly how many meters I need. And then I can divide that by the number of meters per ball of the wool that I want to use. And you can kind of roughly arrive. And then usually I would always advocate buy an extra one just to be safe. So that's pretty much what I did. I figured 5 should be plenty. But yeah, you can't just assume that if it says you need 4 bowls, that you need 4 bowls of any yarn. Doesn't work like that. It's funny, I remember at the knitting shop where when I was working in a craft store back in Sydney at Morris & Sons, we had a big sale on, and I just remember 8 hours of standing on my feet, and I must have had 50 people that day ask me, how many bowls of wool does it take to knit a scarf? And there is no answer to that question. All right, it depends, as you just heard, it depends on how big the ball of wool is. I mean, we're talking 50-gram balls here, but this wool comes in 100-gram balls. It comes in bigger hanks. So first of all, how heavy, we sell it by weight. How heavy is the actual ball or skein that you're talking about? 2, what is it made out of? Because that's going to determine how long the wool is, the yarn is that you're knitting with. 3, what needle size are you going to knit it with? Because I can knit a very thin wool on big needles and make a big lacy effect. Or I can knit a thicker wool on thinner needles and it'll be a thicker, denser fabric, and that will use up more wool. So again, that depends. Next question, what pattern are you going to knit? Are you going to be doing a farrow like this where you've got multiple colors in a row? That's going to use up a different amount than just knitting plain. Are you doing a lacy pattern or a cable or a rib? Because all of those will use different amounts of wool and create different thicknesses of fabric. And lastly, how big a scarf are you going to make? Because you can make just a little one that goes around your neck, or you might want a giant Doctor Who scarf that's 14 feet long. So for the first 5 people who asked me, I would go through these factors and try and explain to them why there is no answer to the question of how many balls of wool does it take to knit a scarf. And then by the end of the day, I got tired and I just started saying 4. You need 4 balls of wool. so while there is no answer, if you get tired of explaining it, just say 4. That's what I did. But I like a big scarf anyway, but yeah, no. Oh, I'm getting back around to the joins. So these are the slightly thicker stitches, I can tell. I'm just going to knit those and we're past the join. And look, I can tell a little bit there that there's a join, but it'll be fine once I give it a good wash and a blocking, it'll be fine. But yeah, that's where the join is. Gosh, this hour just flies by each time. And look, I've got more people online now. Wow, thanks for joining in. You've missed all the excitement. I had a good rant about knitting software. I joined in a new ball of wool. Excitement. You'll want to go back to the instant replay for that one. And I've just talked about how many balls of wool it takes to knit a scarf and why the answer is both unknowable and 4. So I don't really have a deadline on this sweater. I'm just making it for me. It's not a Christmas gift for anyone or anything like that. There's a stitch there where I'll just go back with my needle and pull in it a little bit. It looks like where the end where I felted it together has come apart a little bit. Yeah, 42. The answer to how many balls of wool is 42. Answer to life, the universe, and how many balls of wool it takes to knit a scarf. Thank you, Gumnut Baby. Yes, 42 also works. I should have said 42. I'd have sold a lot more yarn, eh? Yeah. No, so I'm not knitting this to any particular deadline, but I have decided to set myself a little bit of a challenge. So I don't know if it's achievable or not. One of the things knitters like to do is just set arbitrary challenges for themselves. And so every year on Ravelry, there's a bunch of people who will, what do they call it? The Tour de Fleece. So when the Tour de France is happening, and the idea is you pick a project and you cast on, you start knitting as the event kicks off, and the goal is to try and finish it by the time the event finishes. So the Tour de Fleece is a big one that happens. There's also famously the Ravelympics, which... Incidentally, the Olympic Committee actually messaged Ravelry and had them stop using that name because people were going to confuse a bunch of knitters knitting while they watched the Olympics with the actual Olympics. So they've had to call it something else, I believe. I think Pan-Hellenic knitting games or something like that. But yeah, but right now, the big event happening in my life, I work for Amazon Web Services, AWS, and we have our big conference on reInvent, which in past years was 1 week long in Las Vegas. But due to COVID, I'm not in Las Vegas. I'm sitting in Germany, and we have made it a free online event over 3 weeks. And we're 1 week in. So I'm sort of thinking to myself, can I finish this in 2 weeks before the last session of reInvent? Because, I've watched quite a few sessions this week. I did a few official duties. I've had to appear on a few streams for it, but I've been watching a lot of the sessions and I've been knitting through them. So I'm kind of wondering, setting myself a little bit of a challenge, can I finish this sweater by the time reInvent is done 2 weeks from now? Oh, dropped a stitch. Excitement. Hold the presses. Dropped a stitch. We did this last week, and I should show you how to fix it for those of you who missed it, because my friend Jenna tweeted me and said that she never knew how to fix a dropped stitch. She just kind of plonks it back on the needle and keeps going. Don't do that, folks. Let me show you how to do it. So basically what dropping a stitch means is it slipped off the left-hand needle, and see this stitch here in the middle? Like, it could just unravel, and I don't want it to unravel, so I've caught it. I caught it before it went too far. And if you look, you can see behind it, there are 2 strands. So it's slipped down 2 rows. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back on the left needle. So there it is. And so there's those 2 strands behind it. I'm going to pick up the bottom strand, so the closest one to it. Whoops. There we go. So there's the stitch, and there's the strand. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the strand over, or lift the stitch over the strand. So I've actually created, you can see it's the same as knitting it. I've just created that stitch. All right, so now I've got one, and I've still got one loose strand behind it. So I'm going to pick up the next strand. And you could do this all the way up. Do I have a crochet hook? I said I was going to show people how to do it with a crochet hook. Hang on a second. Yes, I do. Crochet hook. All right, so that's another way to fix a dropped stitch, is instead, let's pretend you catch it and you put it on a crochet hook. So see here, I've got that stitch on a crochet hook, and there behind it you can see the strand that I need to pick up. So all I'm going to do is hook the strand and pull it through the stitch on the hook, and then put it back on my needle. So you can do it with a crochet hook, and it's basically just crocheting a chain up the entire row. That's essentially what knitting is. It's a vertical interlocked sort of chain like that. And so you can do it with a crochet hook. I do it with the needles. Just don't stress. Just make sure you catch it when it falls. And no matter how far, if you're just doing stocking stitch like this, no matter how far it falls, you can fix it. You've just got to catch it and then find each of those little ladders above it, and then each one pull through the loop, pull through the loop, pull through the loop. Yes, Margaret, the Olympic Committee were a little bit of jerks like that, but with the Ravolympics. So yeah, this is just going to be a lot of plain knitting for the next 2 weeks if I'm actually going to get this done. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to go long sleeve or short sleeve. The pattern itself you would have seen in the photo was short sleeve, and that's kind of nice. You can layer it over a long sleeve t-shirt, and I've got a couple thin yoked 4-ply jumpers that I've done like that. But it might also be nice to have a long sleeved one. So I'm debating at the moment. And the nice thing is, because this jumper is top down, I don't have to decide. I will knit the sleeves down from the body, and I can decide how long they are. That's why I really like top-down jumpers. If, like me, you are a giant, because I'm tall and I have long arms, if I knit a published pattern, knit it to the schematic, it's never long enough. And so when you knit top-down like this, it's great. You get to defer some of those decisions. You get to defer deciding how long it is in favor of just trying it on. by putting it on either a really long circular or slipping it onto some waist wool, as I showed you before. So you can actually decide. And so I haven't yet decided whether it's going to be long sleeve or short sleeve. I'll decide that probably based on how bored I am knitting just this endless 4-ply stocking stitch. And we're coming up to the hour. Gosh, this goes fast. Sorry for the breaks in the stream earlier. Switching to the browser for some reason gave my computer a little bit of a headache, so it didn't like that very much, and it may have broken the stream for you. I did, incidentally, if you missed last week and you want to see it, it is still, I have them set up so that they're visible on Twitch for 2 weeks, but I am actually copying them over to YouTube as well. So they will stay on my YouTube site, so on my YouTube page. So if you do want to go back and see a past session, you can go to YouTube and watch them there. Or if you really hate Twitch, you can just watch them on YouTube as well. But I think this is kind of fun. I hope you're all having a lovely Sunday. Nothing happens in Germany on Sunday. All the grocery stores are shut. Most of the shops are shut. So it's going to be a quiet one for us. Probably just knit. I'll stop and stretch the hands. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining me. I will probably do another session tonight before bed. So in about, what time will I do it? 9 o'clock. So about 10 hours from now, I'll probably have another go. See if I can knit another row or two on this. So if you want to join me then, you're welcome to. That's a little bit more convenient for the US time zone. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Don't forget, send through any questions you've got through Twitter, or you can message me on here. Happy to address any knitting questions you've got in the future. And I will see you next week. Bye.